Hi there guys, and welcome to another episode of the Cover Zero Show with me, your host Simon Conboy. It's Tuesday, so as per, we will be going through last night's top 100 player reveal, and I will be giving my opinion on the players list as well as giving you my own list and my reasoning for selecting the players that I have chosen. So we'll hop right on in. Player number 30 on the players list was Seahawks safety Earl Thomas. Now, he did appear on my list, but somewhat lower. I say somewhat lower, significantly lower, coming in at 99. I thought he played solid whilst he was on the field last year. Of course, ended up missing a chunk of games, broke his leg against Carolina. And even had he stayed healthy, I'm not sure he'd have necessarily cracked the top 50 of my list. I don't think it was his best season when he was on the field. You could say there was a bit of a down year across the board for the secondary in Seattle. Not to say, by any means these players were bad, but they have, especially for me, Thomas and Chancellor have set the pace at those positions over the last 3-4 years. And I thought last season was a bit of a down year for Thomas. So as I think this is a bit of a I think he's been placed over where he overperforming what he actually did on the field. That said, I still think he is the top 3 safety in football. If I had to pick one guy, to play a game tomorrow, to man that free safety spot, this is the guy I'd go for. I still think he's the best centre fielder in the league. I think he's absolutely key to the Seahawks defence being able to play that cover 3 scheme as effectively as it does. You can't replace that kind of range and knowledge. He's an experienced veteran player now and as good a ball hawk as there possibly is at that position in the league. Still a stellar tackler, great all-round player, no real holes in his game. Hopefully he's back healthy next year. And I think when he's at his best, this is the right kind of range for him. He is a top 30-40 player in the NFL. I think based on last season, is slightly below his usual standard of production and the injury. I do think the players have overrated him here. So myself, number 30, player that I'm sure is going to be significantly higher on the players list, Oakland Raiders quarterback Derek Carr. I thought he was very effective last season, of course. Who wouldn't? A legitimate MVP candidate, and really did look like a young franchise quarterback ready to lead this team for a very long period of time. Really did improve over his previous campaigns, and I thought we saw great leadership. Did not make too many mistakes, put the team in good positions. Reminded me, honestly, this is the highest praise you can get, reminded me a lot of Brady in terms of the way he attacked teams. Didn't go deep necessarily too much, wasn't the most aggressive, was more than happy to take what was given to him. Was very accurate, very productive on those short routes. I mean, he's very good in the red zone. I think him and Crabtree in particular have quite a good rapport in that area of the field. And he was more than willing, if he could see a matchup that he liked, to just abuse that matchup rather like a rather spammy player on Madden. And I do think that is a trait that is too often ignored, and I stand by. Tom Brady is the best I've ever seen at that style of play, but saw a lot of that from Carr. As I say, for me to be higher on this list, I needed to see more high difficulty throws. There were stretches where I think he went a bit cold. Of course, there was the period where he had the finger injury and didn't look quite as impressive, and of course ended up missing the last game of the season. Or was it 2 games? I can't remember, after breaking his leg. But this is absolutely one of the best young quarterbacks in football based on what we saw last season. I thought he had an incredible season. And, if I was going to be as QB heavy as the players list, he'd probably be ranked about where they'll end up putting him. But for now, I think this was fair. I think he's clearly going to be a mainstay of the list for years to come, barring some injuries. the Raiders, they certainly look like they hit the jackpot with that one. And it's certainly going to be interesting to see how much he gets paid. But I think this guy's got a better arm than people probably gave him credit for leaving college. Manoeuvrability's fine, but he has picked up the NFL game quicker than I expected. I did like him coming out of college, but I didn't expect this level of play, especially this soon. So an exceptional job there. Coming in at number 29 on the players list is Buccaneers number 1 receiver Mike Evans. I think this is a bit low. Personally, I thought last year he was basically a highlight reel. His year 2 had a hell of a lot of drops for the Buccaneers, but you could see that he'd improved the other areas of his game from his rookie season. I think last year he really did put it all together and was as complete a receiver as we had in all of football. Because of his size, he's a monstrous run blocker. Real good effort player as well in that regard, because you do have some of those huge guys who are not good at that job because they're not interested in doing it. But this is a guy that seems to enjoy that physical aspect of it. One of the most physical players in the league, especially at the line of scrimmage. Best example of that would be that game against the Seahawks, where he beat Sherman on 2 very aggressive physical routes, with both players doing a lot of fighting. Sherman did not take that too well, but it was one of those 6 of one, half a dozen in the other, and he won the matchup both times. I think it's low simply because this team, Tampa last year, does not come close to winning 9 games without him. There were large chunks of the season where this offense was pretty much Mike Evans with Cameron Brate and Adam Humphries chipping in and not much else. Teams could pretty much dedicate all of their focus and attention on stopping Mike Evans. They still had a hard time doing it. The amount of high difficulty catches that he made, contested catches, was just absurd. I think he really was exceptional and improved just about every area of his game over what we'd seen previous. So for me, just because of the difficulty of the job he had last year, I would rank him higher, but it's good to see him getting a high spot on this list. He truly deserves it. I think he was absolutely phenomenal last season for Tampa, and hopefully, as a Bucs fan, hopefully that carries on. For myself, player number 29 on my list, a player from that same draft class and probably the highest profile receiver from it, Odell Beckham Jr. A lot of what I just said about Mike Evans does apply here. The Giants' offense last year just flat out looked broken, and without Beckham there, I don't know what that team would have looked like. I know it would have been significantly worse. Once again, he had a great season. Possibly, I think you've got the Antonio Brown Julio conversation, and then for the next tier and the next generation, I guess, of receivers, I think you've got Mike Evans and Odell Beckham that both fulfill similar roles, and it somewhat comes down to a preference as to what you'd want in your number 1 receiver. But Beckham is a similar style of game where he's just such an athlete at the position. Of course, not the biggest guy, even though he's got great hands, huge hands. Did see some drops last year, but still makes some phenomenal athletic plays and some absurd catches over the course of a season. He offers the run after the catch ability that you perhaps don't get with a couple of those bigger guys. Very elusive, great route runner, smart player. Really does offer everything you could want from a number 1 wide receiver. Just for me, last year there were a few blips, a few games where I think he had a few drops. Still lets players and situations get into his head, and I think that does have an effect on his play on the field. If I was a corner going up against him, I would just spend the whole day irritating him, like we've seen Josh Norman do, because I do think it leads to a decline in his production. But this is as gifted a receiver as we've got in the NFL at the moment, and if he can iron out some of those issues, I think he ends up climbing this list even higher next season. Coming in at number 28, sticking in New York on the players list, we've got Landon Collins, the Giants strong safety, and man, what a jump from year 1 to year 2. I thought his rookie season was okay, not particularly good, but maybe not. There were some things I think to be concerned about. Well, they're all gone. Last year he was absolutely stellar, and for me a legitimate defensive MVP candidate. I mean, the talk was when he was coming out, maybe doesn't have the best ball skills, doesn't have the best range, he's just a thumper, hence why he fell to round 2. However, last year, he had 5 picks and made plenty of plays in coverage. That is the area he most struggled as a rookie, and a lot of those scout reports appeared to be true. Well, he's certainly proved a lot of people wrong last year. Just was continuously making plays, always around the ball. I mean, racking up over 100 tackles at the safety position is impressive, especially when the defense is good. When I see high tackle numbers from a safety, it normally means that defense is bad. Whereas in this case, this was just a guy who clearly has grasped the speed of the NFL game, has really got to grips with game planning, what teams are doing in his film study, and it showed on the field. He was very rarely out of position, made turnovers, made key stops, is a phenomenal tackler at the position, which of course you do want to have sure tackling safeties, to say the least. And you'd have to say, based on last year, that the sky's the limit. Reminded me a lot of Cam Chancellor last year in terms of his physicality against the run, and that's about as high a compliment as I can give a safety in terms of that aspect of his game. And when you combine that with the quality that he showed in coverage, an all-pro season, just a stellar season, deserves all the plaudits that came to him. And yeah, he's not appeared on my list yet. He does appear a bit higher. Again, I think this is a result of the position he plays. We know the top of the list is going to be full of skill players and quarterbacks, but the players who've got him high up. I'd like to see him higher, but at least they got him in there. Myself, I have Travis Kelce at this spot, the Chiefs tight end. I think with Gronkowski injured, it probably allowed some of the other tight ends in the league last year to get a bit more attention than they may otherwise have done. And I think really that let us see Jordan Reed and Travis Kelce are probably the two best young receiving tight ends in the league at this point in time. I prefer Kelce as a player overall because I think he offers you more in the run game. He's a rugged blocker and a very, very dynamic player after the catch. Very physical, tough to tackle, and he plays more like a traditional tight end. Jordan Reed is basically a wide receiver that lines up at the tight end spot every now and then. I think Kelce can do both of those jobs for you. Really did look like maybe a poor man's Gronkowski, and I mean that in the nicest way possible. Last season, I dread to think what the Chiefs' pass game would look like without him, because in spite of Tyreek Hill's explosiveness, I think if you get rid of Kelce, then this offense probably falls apart. I think this is the one truly legitimate top-tier weapon that offense has. And, I mean, what is there to say? The guy has great hands, is superb after the catch, and has really advanced as an intelligent player. I always say to be successful as a traditional inline tight end, you have to be very good at understanding zone concepts, and you've got to be on the same page. You are playing in the positions over the middle of the field where there is the most traffic, and that's where mistakes cannot be made, because that's when turnovers occur, and you don't see too many of them when this guy's involved. I'll talk about him a little bit later in the episode because he also appears on the players list, and we're very much on the same page on this one. So yeah, I think he's an exceptional player, and as I say, I'll get back to him in very shortly. Number 27 on the players list was LaShawn McCoy. I didn't expect him to come this high on the players list. Again, not too far off where I had him. I had him appear at 38 in last week's episode. I stand by this, is the most elusive running back I've possibly ever seen, but he's definitely the most elusive in the league at the moment. I dread to think again what the Bills would look like without him, because that passing game is maddeningly inconsistent at this point in time. Sean McCoy is a big chunk of that passing game and is explosive and dangerous a runner in the open field as you can get. Carries this offense, does a superb job. As I say, I talked about him a bit more last week, so check that episode out if you want a more detailed analysis. There's not a huge amount to say. Shady is what you see is what you get, and better inside runner than people have ever given him credit for, though. Exceptional player. Again, surprised to see him this high on the players list, but I think it's a testament to how good he has been in Buffalo. My player at number 27 is Ravens and long-time Charger safety Eric Weddle. Man, why did the Chargers let this guy go? I don't understand what all that fallout was. He wanted to stay with the Chargers. I'm sure he'd have took a more team-friendly deal. And he was an exceptional player his entire time there, and that frankly just carried over. If anything, he had one of his best seasons of his career. I think the defence there was pretty talented in Baltimore last season. I'm a bit more iffy on them heading into next year. But once again, he had a great season. Very, very smart player. Not the most athletic of the high-end safeties, but certainly one of the smartest. I think you could play him at strong safety if you wanted, because he really is a willing and rugged tackler. You will see him miss a few just because he's not the biggest dude, and occasionally he'll get overwhelmed, especially by some of the bigger tight ends. But again, this is a player that's often in the right spot at free safety, and there's not many players I'd trust more than him to be that last line of defence. Gets the whole secondary organised. I really do think the significant improvement in that Ravens secondary last year stemmed from Eric Weddle's presence. He's been perennially underrated throughout his career. Perhaps if the Ravens can get on a bit of a run, people will start to acknowledge how good this guy has been for the last 5 or 6 years. An absolutely stellar player. I love watching him play. I thought the Ravens were a perfect fit for him, and he really put that together with one of the best seasons of his pretty stellar career last season. Great player, and happy to see him getting some recognition. Back to the players list. As I said, number 26, only 2 spots away from where I had him, Travis Kelce. As I said there, just a dynamic all-round tight end. I value that ability. Because you've got guys like Jordan Reed, I don't think you necessarily treat them like a tight end. I think you treat him like a receiver and you try and play physical with him. And alright, he'll out-physical your guys a lot of the time, especially some of them nickelbacks. A guy like Kelce, I don't think you can do that because he's got that inline ability. You've got to have a guy that can at least try and shed a block. It's not just going to be a washout if he's there. If he's lining up in line, you don't know what he's necessarily going to do, so it allows you to do more with your personnel. I think that is such an essential part of playing that position to a high level, and that's why I'd rather have a guy like Greg Olsen, who also ranked higher than a guy like Jordan Reed, or your guys like Jimmy Graham. Whilst I think they're great players, I do think that you can treat them like wide receivers as a coach and on the field. I think that's how the defence can adjust to them. Kelce really does give you the best of both worlds. I think behind Gronk, a healthy Gronk, he is the best all-round tight end in football. And I've got to give the players credit on this one. We're actually very, very close on this. This only happened a few times that we've been pretty much exact. I think we've only had one that we had exact. So no complaints to the players here. This is definitely the right range for him. What a season he had. Coming in at that spot on my list is one of the biggest players in the league, Calais Campbell, the former Cardinal, now with the Jags. Last season, I think, was one of his absolute best. It flew somewhat under the radar because, the Cardinals were a bit of a disaster, especially considering the high expectations they had coming in. I dread to think what this defence would have looked like without him. That front seven, he had great play at the outside backer position, but the interior left a fair bit to be desired. I like Deon Buchanan, but having basically a safety playing at linebacker isn't ideal. Kevin Minter's a smaller guy. I think a lot of teams could just line up and pound them last year, and if Campbell wasn't there holding down the fort, because he is as good a run defender as this league has, who knows how that would have looked. And the exterior guys did their job as well in that regard. As I say, Chandler Jones had an exceptional season. He appeared earlier in this, but I really think Campbell has, as much as people have got to know who he is in the last couple of years, I still feel like he's been underrated. If it wasn't for JJ Watt, this is a guy that we'd be looking at as one of the great 3-4 ends of all time, and I really do believe that he has been that good. And last year, once again, he was just that good. Constantly gets pressure. Maybe doesn't necessarily get the enormous sack numbers that, again, using JJ Watt, and I hate that I have to always compare him to him, but that's just the way it is, unfortunately. Gets stellar sack numbers for the position and very good sack numbers for any type of interior lineman, but all the while is just an absolute force against the run. Gets penetration, can hold up double team as well as anybody. Very difficult to block one-on-one because of his length. You can see plenty of times a lot of teams just seem to ignore him in the run game and just go the other way, because if you try and block him one-on-one, he'll just stand you up. And there's really, as an offensive lineman, there's not a lot you can do, especially those guards and centres who haven't got that length. And this guy's strong enough that he will just wall you off, and nothing going there for you as an offense. So stellar player. Gets a lot of deflected balls, of course, when you're 6'8", 6'9", whatever he is. Those long arms, far quicker and more agile than he looks. He makes some incredibly athletic plays. He really has been a stellar player for a long time, and I know Arizona fans are going to miss him dearly. They really need that Robert Nkemdiche to step up. And no chance he replaces that level of production, though. It'll be interesting to see how he does in Jacksonville. But yeah, incredible player, and he had an incredible season. Coming in at number 25 on the players list, got a player I revealed last week, my number 33, and the player's number 25, Joe Thomas. Arguably the best left tackle of a generation. Well, in fact, no, certainly the best left tackle of his generation. Of course, what is he at this point? 8-9 time All-Pro. I think the 1 year he didn't make it, like his rookie season. It's just incredible. The best pass protector I've ever seen. That still remains the case. I still think he's the gold standard. Got better with run blocking as his career's gone on. Again, this is a player, if you want to see a more detailed discussion, I revealed him last week and talked about there. But I think this is what you want your left tackle to look and play like. A real leader in that locker room. As I say, one-on-one has been shutting down the best guys in the business for years. You think some of the pass rushes he's had to deal with on a yearly basis over his time there in the AFC North. We're talking about, Terrell Suggs when he was in his prime, James Harrison, Lamar Woodley. There's been some very good players that he's gone up against, and one-on-one I don't trust anyone else more. As I say, he's improved as a run blocker over his time. He's been Stella Brown. I think this is a fair range. A lot of these players such as Thomas do get here on name value each year, but in Thomas's case his play really does back that up. Myself, the best lineman of his generation, this possibly the best lineman of the new generation, Cowboys guard Zach Martin. What is there to say about this guy? He stepped in from day one and looked like an all-pro, and has been treated as such. We've seen the success that Dallas managed to have, keeping that line intact last year, between him and Travis Frederick. I mean, you saw some monstrous run lanes last year. This guy's just absolutely dominating in both phases of the game. There is no real weakness to his game. He's got the mobility to be used on screens, to be used on toss sweeps, and a lot of those other plays. That there are plenty of guards that, with his level of physicality, some of the bigger guards, they just can't make it. But this guy's athletic enough that he can, and yet he's got the strength on the interior to handle some of these big 3-4 ends one-on-one. I mean, if you get him and Frederick teaming up on you, then it's just game over. And what makes that, to me, such a difficult prospect for a D-line is if those two do decide to double a guy, they're getting that guy out of the way, but you don't know who's going to get to the second level, because both of those players are very adept and capable of doing it, and Ezekiel Elliott does a great job running behind him. This is just an incredible player. I discussed him when he was on the players list a few weeks ago, which, again, players like Tyreek Hill being rated ahead of him. It's a sick world we live in where offensive linemen still don't get their due. I think I've only got the one guard left on my list personally, so maybe I've fallen a little bit in that regard, just like the players did, but not nearly as bad. Not as bad as they have, but an incredible player. Again, this is a player that, as long as he stays healthy, there's no reason to think he's not going to be around this point or higher up on the list every single year. So there you have it. Zach Mine, perennial All-Pro, possibly in the vein of Joe Thomas at this rate. Coming in at number 24 on the 24 on the players list. Player I revealed last week, 10-spot difference, Russell Wilson, the Seahawks quarterback. I'm glad to see him this high up simply because his numbers weren't overwhelmingly impressive last year, but I think to some degree the players can recognise what he was dealing with, and that offense, a team with zero run game and one of the worst offensive lines I've seen in recent years, was running for his life, spent large chunks of the season playing hurt. Lord knows recovering from those injuries can't have been easy with some of the beatings he took last year. I still remember, week 1 very well against the Dolphins. He took an absolute pasting in that game. Still managed to win. Doesn't have the best weapons around him. I love Doug Baldwin. Jimmy Graham's a fine player. But, compared to some of the other high-powered teams, some of these other franchise quarterbacks, he's not quite as fortunate. Still gets the job done. Incredibly elusive. Again, this is a player I spoke about last week. If you want a more detailed diagnosis of him as a player, check that episode out. But real great leader. I'm always happy to see players who don't necessarily have great statistical success on this list if they pass the eyeball test. Last year, Russell Wilson absolutely did. I think it was, in some ways, the best season of his career. There is no way that offense should have been as productive as it was. The reason they managed to actually score points, Russell Wilson, he really did carry that offense at times last year. Great job from him. I'm at number 24 on my list. We've got another offensive lineman. I know I've got a lot more of these at this point than the players do. I said this was going to happen and I wasn't wrong. Hardly rocket science on my part though, figuring that out. Andrew Whitworth, the new Ram and long-time Cincinnati Bengal. I've been saying for the last 2-3 years, at some point this guy's play is going to fall off, and whilst he might still be good, he's not going to keep playing at an all-pro level. No, turns out he will. I think the last couple of years he has been, well, not last couple, it's been several years now, he's been up there with Joe Thomas. They have been the gold standard at the position. I think Whitworth gives you and has given you more as a run blocker. Maybe not quite as fluid in pass pro. But still absolutely exceptional in that regard. It's been defending guys one-on-one with very little help for a large chunk of his career. Again, rather like Calais Campbell, it took a while for him to start getting the recognition for how good he was. And now he's getting it, so that's all well and good. Again, this is a player, as I said there, I think his play could fall off next year. He's 36 now, but last season he was absolutely great, and I think it was even more impressive because I don't think that Cincinnati line was particularly good. I think him and Zietler held up their end of the deal, but the rest of them not so much, and I think the proof will be in the pudding next year as to how good those two were, because I really expect Cincinnati's line to struggle. Whitworth is going to be a huge game for the Rams, who of course were awful in the trenches last year, so we'll get to see what he adds there, but he's been a great leader, exceptional all-round player. Again, we're at that point where it's hard to read diagnosis because I'm talking about players that have basically no holes in their game, and Whitworth last year was just exceptional. Run, pass, just had an incredible season. Great player, and more than worthy of coming in at such a high spot on my list. Heading to number 23 on the players list, there's another one, rather like the old Thomas one. I said this early in my list, there are going to be a lot of players on the players list that basically didn't contribute last year. Gronkowski did. He did a little bit. That's why he got 94 on mine. While he was on the field, he was fantastic, as we all expect, but really did not play much. As a result, I don't like having players this high up on the list. I mean, what is there to say about Gronk, though? I mean, he's the best tight end I've ever seen play the game. I mean, the best run blocking tight end I've seen, and he's probably the best receiving tight end I've seen. I mean, I've seen faster. I think that's it. I think that's the only thing I can say. I've seen faster guys playing the position. He does everything else better than everyone else I've seen play. I mean, he's a phenomenal weapon, isn't he? Yeah, just great hands, incredibly dynamic after the run. I mean, he makes guys look bad. He runs angry. Incredibly dangerous weapon. As good as it gets. As I say, best tight end I've ever seen. I don't know how you're meant to stop him when he's healthy. And for that reason, I understand why he's here. I just, it's meant to be the top 100 players of last season. Or is it meant to be next season based on last season? Whatever it is, and either way, it's tough to put a guy who got injured, missed such a large amount in the season, that high up. But unquestionably the best tight end in football, possibly the best weapon in football. He's absolutely ridiculous player. Coming in at that spot on my list, however, someone who did stay healthy and once again had a great season. It's Aqib Talib, the Denver Broncos corner. I'm not sure if there's a more consistent man corner in the league right now. The Broncos are as good as the other two guys there are, and Chris Harris was revealed on my list last week. I do rate him very highly also. Talib is the glue that holds that secondary together. He's the guy that lines up opposite the other team from number one each week. Routinely does a good job shutting them down. He's just got better and better with each year he's been in the league, and he's been a perennial Pro Bowler the last 5 years, but I honestly do feel that he just keeps improving his level of play. He's always been a good run player, maybe not the best tackler, but I want my corners to be willing and in the right places, and he's absolutely one of those. That's not to say he's a terrible tackler, but most corners miss. You get a few exceptions like Charles Harrison. Rondé Barber was a shockingly good tackler considering his size. But either way, I'm diverging here. Diverging. But either way, fantastic player. As I say, I think he's as good a man corner as there is in the league right now. Very physical. You can put him in press. Great ball hawk. You get a lot of good man corners that are not good at locating the ball necessarily and making plays on it. Talib's always had great hands. He's always had great instincts for when the ball's coming and making a play on it. I think we've seen teams trying to avoid him, but it's so difficult in Denver. If he played in a different team, I think teams would just ignore his side of the field. However, you got to throw at one of those guys, and as a result, I do think he gets the bonus of being a true number one corner that actually gets some targets, so he can boost his stats a bit. But I don't mean that to take away from him. So I've got him at 23 on this list. I overrate him very highly. I think he's an incredible player. It'll be interesting to see how much longer he can keep doing it, because he is starting to get up there. But once again, an incredible season. I think the best season of his career to date, and it's been a pretty good career up until this point. So, moving on, number 22 on the players list. Now, this is probably the most controversial thing about my list, is that this player did not make mine. So, we're gonna have that discussion now. Player 22 on the players list is Ben Roethlisberger. Now, I have said there are a lot less quarterbacks on my list than on most. I think Roethlisberger absolutely would have made this list if I was basing it on the first 7 weeks of the season. After that point, I felt he was very average. I really do, considering what a stellar supporting cast he had. That was the point in the season where Le'Veon Bell was just tearing teams to pieces. And, there were some games where they were giving him 30, 35 touches. That says to me that, one, they were concerned with Roethlisberger. They knew there was something there, whether it was an injury. I figure it must have been. But you don't want your running back getting that, especially one who's had injury problems, getting that many touches. And I just thought he was very underwhelming. We saw it in the playoff loss to the Patriots. I think he was okay against the Chiefs. I think he struggled there. Over the second half of the season, I just do not think he was an exceptional quarterback. I think he was solid in terms of didn't turn the ball over, but I don't feel like he made enough plays. And considering he's got one of the best receiving weapons in the league in Antonio Brown, such a great offensive line, and whilst I don't think the rest of the receiving core was great, there are options there. I just don't particularly think last year, I think if Roethlisberger was honest, I don't think he'd say it was his best year or even close to it. So for that reason, he did not make my list. Of course, I expected him to be on the players list, and I expected him to be high up. But, I don't think he was. I don't think he deserved it based on his play last year. I really don't. And it feels harsh marking a guy down for his supporting cast being so good. But I really feel as the Steelers as a team were playing their best football towards the end of the year, and that's when I think Roethlisberger most stood out as not a strength of the team, which has been, it's been the opposite the last few years, where it's felt like he's been, they've been winning because of him and those skill players. Whereas last year I felt the defense really came together. The offense was playing at a high level other than Roethlisberger himself. So for that reason, I couldn't put him on. I think he's been very much overrated by the players if you're looking at the tape from last year. If he comes back healthy and is the Roethlisberger that I've become, accustomed to over the years, absolutely, I think this is probably a fair kind of rating for him on a normal year. But I'm still not over it. Those levels of performance last year. So expect maybe to get a bit of heat for that one. But that's, as I say, that's my most controversial opinion, I think, of my list, and I stand by it. So there you go. Come at me in the comments. Coming in at number 22 on my list was the absolutely exceptional Joey Bosa. I waxed lyrical about how good this guy was last season, and I still struggle to get across in words how dominant he was. There were spells last year where he looked like the best defensive player in football, and for a rookie, especially a rookie who held out and missed the start of the season, training camp, off-season rookie workouts, and all of that, to just sort of turn up and dominate on a good defense, where I think you've got Melvin Ingram's an exceptional player playing on the opposite side. You've got a couple of really good corners there, but Bosa really did, and there were games last year where he looked like the best player on both teams. It's incredible. The players had him ranked, 100? That's absurd. You can't tell me that if you watch the tape from last year, he was that low down the list. Of course, being a rookie, maybe players feel like he's got to earn his dues, but if you're just looking at the tape, this was one of the best defenders in all of football. Was good against the run, was very good, but as a pass rusher was just dominant. And they used him in a lot of ways. You saw him getting pressure in, getting through guys on the interior, going around the edges, just a speed rusher, ball rushing, it didn't matter. Teams just didn't seem to have a good answer for him. I'm interested to see where it goes next year, to see if teams can perhaps adapt to some of what he likes to do. We often see that happen with players who have great early initial successes, normally a couple of contributing factors, or if he just is, that legitimate a player. I'm going to edge towards the second side. I really think he was that good last year. What a season he had. One of the most damning indictments of the players list for me was how low he was. I am very confident putting him this high up. I thought he was that good. Just well worth watching Chargers games last year just to see him and Ingram. I really enjoyed the amount of pressure those two got on guys. Coming in at number 21 on the players list. Again, this is another one for me. It's an over-ranking. It's Richard Sherman. Now, I had Sherman... Where did I have him? Just looking through my list. Down at 66. I thought he was solid last year. He made my list after all. And 66 is not a bad place to be. But of the last 3-4 years, I think last season was certainly his weakest. I think we saw a lack of focus from him at times. I think he did seem to get in his own head, especially with some of the frustration that we saw him clearly letting out at other players and coaches on the team. I think it was the first time we've seen that he can be... He's perhaps not as physically gifted as some of the other top corners. Now, normally he does make up for that. He's got exceptional size and he is very quick and talented for using that size. But I think we saw some players out physicaling him at times. We saw some players just getting free of him, which I'm not used to seeing. Wasn't quite... Normally he's just flat out dominant in press, and last year he was very good at it, but he did lose more than I've been accustomed to. As I say, I think a lot of it was him being in his own head. But still, had a great season. But I just feel, to have him above guys like Talib, if you watch the tape last year, there's no argument. Aqib Talib was the better player in the 2016 NFL season than Richard Sherman was. Patrick Peterson was a better player than Richard Sherman was last year. I don't know if that's necessarily the case next year, but last year that absolutely was. And I know Sherman's made a name for himself, but I can't condone this ranking. I think it's too high, and I don't know if there's any corners necessarily left on the list. So potentially have him as the highest rated corner. Based on last year's tape, I don't think you can do it. So there you go. Myself, and I think if teams felt the same way, someone would have traded for him. Personally, the players clearly feel that way. I'm not sure teams do. Coming in at number 21 for me, one of the most unheralded players of the last few years. You know how I mentioned guys like Andrew Whitworth, Calais Campbell finally started getting their dues. This is a guy that I think might finally start getting it, but it's been a very impressive player over the last few years. I think last year was his best season as a pro, and that is Brandon Graham, defensive end for the Eagles. This guy is one of those unfortunate players who's fell victim to stats being such a measure of a player's effectiveness, and it's very disappointing to me. I can't even remember where he was on the players list. I'm pretty sure he turned up. It was been like the 80-90 range. If you watched this Eagles defense last year, I don't see where you get that number from. This guy wreaks absolute havoc. Again, while the sack numbers aren't there, constant pressure, hits on the quarterback, forcing early throws, plays the run superbly well. It's beggars belief. I think that now they've got a bit more help on the D-line. I think Derek Barnett could really help him out. Yeah, now he's got a running buddy there. Fletcher Cox there. I expect this defensive line to be exceptional, and I really do believe, as good as Fletcher Cox is, I think that over the last couple of seasons that this guy has been the best player on that line. And Cox is one of my highest rated DTs in this list. That's how good I think this guy is. And frankly, I'm not entirely sure how he does it, because I watch him on tape and he's got a really good first step, but he's not the biggest guy. Yet he's, one of them smaller guys, manages to use leverage really well. Struggles to sort of shed the block instantly in a play, but does a really good job fighting through things and getting. That's how he gets so much pressure as opposed to maybe the sacks. But there'll come a point. There'll be a season or 2 seasons where the amount of pressure he generates will translate statistically, and hopefully it's next year, because this guy does deserve to get that level of attention that you get, like a Vic Beasley got. He came in at 40, and I don't even think he made my list because he got the numbers. If you would, I imagine if you were to poll teams and scouts, they would take a Brandon Graham over a Vic Beasley at this point, and they're based solely on production last year all day. As valuable as a sack is, you can't replace overall production on a down by down basis, and that's what Brandon Graham gives at this point in time. I think he's one of the best defenders in football, and certainly one of the most underrated. So he wraps up my list. So there you have it. That's 80% of the way through now, and we're at the point now where the players list is just name after name after name. So there's going to be some disagreements. I've got some, I've still got some players that they've revealed that I've got coming up who I feel they've underrated. I'd imagine everyone that there's a few that we should be fairly close on from the looks of things, but once again, the state of this list in terms of QBs and receivers as opposed to linemen, it always frustrates me. Safeties do seem to be getting a lot more of a look in the last few years, and that's a good thing, because I think that's such a tough position to play. But there you go. As always, let me know, what do you guys think? Agree, disagree? Obviously the Roethlisberger one, I imagine, is probably a tough one for a lot of people to grasp, but I really do feel I'm correct on this. It just wasn't a consistent enough season. He missed a couple of games, so he always does, unfortunately. But yeah, I think on the balance, I don't think last season was good enough for me. But let me know, what's your guys' perspective of it? Do you agree, disagree with the list so far? What's your list look like? Let me know. Got the comment section below, the Cover Zero Facebook. Find me on Twitter at Simon Conboy. Going to be a lot more active on the social media. We're going to be revamping the site. Come July, going to have a bit of a new look to it. Going to be a lot more active on these things as the season starts to come up. So there you go. Check it out. Check out some of the other stuff. I've got my paper power rankings. Already done the recording. Just waiting on the shiny new graphics for it. I think you guys should really check that one out. It should be up in the next couple of days. I think it's going to be a really good episode. It's an interesting take on power rankings, trying to add a bit of math to it. Not particularly complicated way, but I think it's going to be really interesting. And definitely check that out. Got the usual Cover Who, another QB quandary coming up. So check them out. And what position is it we're doing? Linebackers on Friday. My weekly review on my top 10 linebackers currently in the NFL. So yeah, check those out. As always, like, share, subscribe, check out the Patreon, all that good stuff. It'll all be greatly appreciated as ever. And thank you very much for your time. I really do appreciate people checking the show out. Have a great evening, and as always, go Bucks.